Hi. Today we are discussing project communication management. Excellent communication is a critical component of project success. In fact, according to the Project Management Institute, PMI, most project failures are due to communication issues. Let's take a look at some of the outcomes of poor communication from a project management perspective. 1. Missed project deadlines and delays in the critical path. 2. Culture of distrust. 3. It limits the engagement of employees, stakeholders, and partners, resulting in poor deliverables and outcomes. The list can go on. Bottom line is that it is the line between a successful and unsuccessful project. As Anne Morrow Lindbergh has truly said, good communication is just as stimulating as black coffee, and just as hard to sleep after. Anne was an accomplished aviator and author. I highly recommend the book, The Aviator's Wife, which is her story, if you want to learn more about her. Let's have a look at the processes involved in communication management. Communication management includes three main processes. 1. Plan communications management. 2. Manage communications. 3. Monitor communications. Now, let's look at plan communication management in detail. The first step is to plan how you will manage communications on your project and across all of your stakeholders. This is done by creating a project communications management plan. It's important to ensure all of these factors are addressed in your plan. Audience. This is a list of all stakeholders affected by the project. It should include team members, sponsors, customers, and other interested parties. Consider anyone impacted by the project or who influences its success. Objective. What will be the purpose of your communications? You may use some communications for awareness, like a status report, and others that require action, such as requiring a sponsor to authorize spending, or a customer to approve project testing. Message. What will the message be for each type of communication? This is the actual content that will be shared. Key components to be communicated include scope, schedule, budget, objectives, risks, and deliverables. Channel. How the message will be delivered. Will it be a formal report emailed out? An informal verbal debrief during a team meeting? Your communication plan should be detailed enough to lay out exactly what will be sent, to whom, how, when, and who is responsible. Involving your stakeholders in the creation of this plan is important. You need to understand their communication preferences and expectations. If you over-communicate, they may stop paying attention. But, if you under-communicate, it can lead to misunderstandings and issues. Please go ahead and pause the video here, and take a look at the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of plan communication management according to the project management body of knowledge. Once the plan has been created and approved, it's the project manager's job to ensure it's managed. This means that the plan needs to be reviewed and updated on a regular basis to reflect any changes to the project or its stakeholders. The project manager also has to manage the execution of the communications management plan. This includes collection and analysis of data, creation of messages for communication, transmission or distribution of communications, storage of any communication reports, files or documents, retrieval of any stored communications, disposal of any old communications upon project closure or a set date. It is important to determine the best methods of managing communication and keeping stakeholders up to date at the right time. Some questions to ask are, what is the most effective way of communication for these specific stakeholders? Is it a one-size-fits-all? Or should there be different methods of communication depending on the involvement of each stakeholder? What is the best way to communicate with the project team? Would they benefit from more communication or less? Would stakeholders benefit from more informal communication over formal communication? Asking these questions would enable a project manager to manage their team's communication effectively. Please go ahead and pause the video here, and take a look at the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs of plan communication management according to the project management body of knowledge. Let's have a look at monitoring project communications. This process used to be called control communications, but was updated in the 6th edition of the project management body of knowledge. Despite the title change, the process is the same. It involves monitoring and controlling project communications throughout its entire life cycle. This may include confirming communications went out as planned, confirming they were received by the proper stakeholders, confirming messages were understood, confirming any relevant feedback was provided to the appropriate project members. The actual type of monitoring, including method and frequency, should be a part of the communication management plan. Please go ahead and pause the video here. Take a look at the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of monitoring communications according to the project management body of knowledge. Think about which tools and techniques would you like to implement in your day-to-day operations to monitor the communications of your team. Successful project managers use formal and informal communication methods across various channels. This helps increase the chances of communication being received. Using simple language, sticking to relevant topics, and keeping messages concise will increase your chances of what you communicate being understood correctly. The following communication skills can also increase a project manager's chances of success. 1. Strong active listening skills. 2. Proficient writing skills. 3. Excellent speaking ability. 4. Asking questions and probing for more information. 5. Setting and managing expectations. 6. Motivating people to become and stay engaged. 7. Conflict resolution skills. Now, let's see how a project manager can keep their team communication streamlined. 1. Make roles explicitly clear. When you have a new project in the works, you need to make it painfully obvious to everybody involved who is responsible for what. Whether that's done through private conversations, a team meeting, or even creating a written roster that lists everyone's assigned duties. There's also one more thing you should make obvious. Who the key decision maker is. When there are questions or issues, who has the final say on what happens next? Taking these steps right off the bat proactively mitigates any mixed messages, while also shutting down that dreaded phrase, "That's not my job." 2. Create a company glossary. While you may think you already communicate clearly, that's likely not the case. Every company develops its own slang or shared understanding, which can be overwhelming for new hires or people from outside departments to comprehend. For that reason, consider creating a company glossary that everyone on your team can use to understand frequently used words and phrases. 3. Assign a point person. You can think of it as a funnel. When you have so many messages coming from all different sources, it's helpful to have them all trickle down to one organized and knowledgeable person who can sort through them. Perhaps it makes sense to have the point person be the project manager. Or maybe it's the department head. You have flexibility in terms of who fills those shoes. The important thing is to designate someone who can serve as the key point of contact for all of those little updates that might otherwise slip through the cracks. 4. Put things in writing. The spoken word can be powerful. But sometimes there's no replacement for putting things in writing. Having things documented serves one major purpose: it adds clarity for your team. There's no refuting that something was assigned or discussed if it was written down and then distributed to every single participant following that conversation. 5. Use confirming phrases. Even when everyone on your team makes an effort to actively listen, confusion still occurs. People might extract the incorrect meaning or take things out of context. It's unfortunate, but it happens. This is why using confirming phrases after somebody speaks can help ensure you both have the same understanding. Some examples of confirming phrases are as follows. To recap, we should. What I just heard was. Let me make sure I understand. By taking that extra minute or two to repeat the highlights of the things you just heard, you'll confirm your shared understanding, and, thus, save tons of time and frustration in the long run. 6. Set rules for your communication channels. From instant messaging to emails to your project management software, your team has a ton of communication methods at their fingertips. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you should make the purpose for each explicitly clear. For example, maybe instant messages should be reserved for urgent requests and casual updates, while your project management software needs to be used for all comments and questions that are specifically related to that project. You have flexibility here to find what works best for your team. But once you have the purpose of each of your communication channels established, document them, so your entire team has a reference, and then monitor those rules to ensure they're being followed. See a message in the wrong place? Point it out so that the whole team develops an understanding of what methods work best for each type of communication. Following these simple guidelines would go a long way in keeping your team's communication streamlined. Let's have a look at online communications and what we can do to be more efficient in communicating online. Philosophers and researchers have been watching their fellow human beings and releasing volumes of communication tips since before we were even born. But as our workforce becomes increasingly virtual, there is a need to focus on virtual communication tips. Consider who you are talking to. With virtual communication, it's likely that at some point you will send a message to someone that speaks a different first language from yourself. In that case, you need to modify your language to accommodate a potentially less advanced vocabulary. Yes, they could Google the words you use. Yes, they could probably figure out what you're saying even if they didn't understand it naturally. But why make their life more difficult when you could easily simplify your communication? It's polite behavior, and a little politeness goes a long way. Watch what you are saying. In person, you'd have the benefit of body language to convey the correct message. Online, not so lucky. You need to choose your words and your punctuation wisely, because they'll alter your message. Since your reader will have the opportunity to dissect every letter, make sure you say exactly what you mean without leaving room for interpretation. Use exclamation points. Add a smiley face to the end of a sentence. Let them know if you're joking. And if you're confused or less than pleased with something, fine, use the ellipsis at the end of your sentence. Choose where to say it. Does your office have a communication guidebook yet? If you communicate with your team over multiple tools, make the different use cases consistent. Use your instant messenger tool for informal chatting. Use your project management tool for all task and project-related conversations. Use email only to communicate with people who don't have access to your project management tool. By segmenting your conversation locations, you'll always know where to find information if you need to reference a conversation. Think about when you deliver your message. Don't message someone at 2 p.m. to let them know you need a task done by 5 p.m. Don't tell someone on Monday that you won't hit your Tuesday deadline. Not only is this bad communication in general, but with virtual communication, you run the additional risk of the recipient not seeing your message in time. Bad planning can have an even more extreme effect with virtual communication. Also, consider timing. Please don't send urgent messages when you know your recipient is sound asleep, and it's probably not a great idea to leave bad news in someone's inbox to be the first thing they read after they wake up. Also, try not to hold on to anger for weeks until you boil over, since your colleagues won't have the opportunity to pick up on the nonverbal cues that would typically tell them you're upset. You need to be upfront with your feelings. Timing can be everything when delivering a message, so take it just as seriously when you're online. Decide why you're saying it. Does it need to be said? As they say, once it's on the internet, it's forever. Before you leave a message in a burst of anger or sarcastic frustration, make sure you'd be comfortable with someone reading your words a week, a month, or a year from now. If there is a kinder way of phrasing your words, that's probably the best route. Take your time. That's all I'm saying. That brings us to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to access the presentation on which this video is based on, it is available at the link displayed on your screen. Thank you for your time.